The following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Media Services, the City of Oshkosh, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everyone, welcome to Eye on Oshkosh. Cheryl Hentz along with Dan Rylance, and I'm surrounded by co-hosts tonight. My current co-host, my previous co-host, Tony Palmeri from the Oshkosh Common Council is our guest, and we're very pleased to welcome him here. So thanks for coming in and talking to us about city business.
Great to be here, and congratulations on the PEG Access Award.
Oh, thank you.
Much deserved.
Thank you. We're very, very honored to have it. Want to cover a lot of things tonight. I'm not even sure we can do it all in an hour, but we're gonna try and get to what we can. I guess the first thing though is, this is May 1st. You just started your second half of your first term. What's the first year been like for you? Has it met your expectations? What's it been like for you?
As you recall, I ran because I was concerned about lack of transparency. I was concerned about some of the directions the city was going in with things like the Access project. And in some areas like open government, I think we have made some progress. I think we've seen some changes in leadership in the city. I think everybody agrees that much of that was related to concerns about transparency or lack thereof. So I think we're making some progress. On some issues, however, I have been very frustrated by the slow pace that we're moving at. Probably the best example is economic development. I and Jessica King, back in the campaign of '07, were calling for things like economic development commissions. We really have made no progress on that at all. The Access project, as you know, is in real trouble.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that.
I did not support that to begin with for reasons we might get into. So overall, I think this is an exciting time for the city of Oshkosh. We obviously are in the process of bringing new leadership into the city. I'm excited to be part of that, but especially on economic development, on poverty issues, I wish we'd made more progress by this point, and we just haven't done it, and I take some responsibility for that.
What about green issues? Because I know you're very big into the environment, as most of us try and be.
Sure.
And, do you feel that we're making enough progress in that area, or
I think one of the major accomplishments of 2007 was the city signing on to the U.S. Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement. It's only voluntary, it's only symbolic, but it is a very powerful document. And in a real sense, it does commit our city to making sure that on everything affecting citizens here, we try and do it in a green way. So I'm glad that we did that. And a result of that was the revival, I should say, of the Energy and Environment Committee. It's got a lot of very passionate young people on it, and I expect them to come forward with some proposals on what we can do differently in the city to save energy, to develop in more green-friendly ways. So I think we are making some progress in that area. And quite frankly, I'm very pleased at what's happening at the national level, because whether we get a President McCain, Obama, or Clinton, all three of them are very, very committed to green policies. So I think these should be exciting years coming up in that area.
On a personal level, Tony, I mean, are you finding you're having to spend as much time on this as you thought you might, or is it more involved than you thought, or how's it been for you personally?
The way our government works, where the agenda is primarily staff-led, and the councilors get flooded with piles of documents, every councilor has a choice. If you want to be able to go into those council meetings and really understand what the staff is talking about, you've got to dig into those documents.
Which you get only on what day?
You
Friday,
generally
isn't it?
get them on the Friday, right?
Okay.
Before
Before the meetings.
right.
Right.
We do get some information every Friday, however, in fairness, but the bulk of the material for each Tuesday meeting is on the Friday. So I find myself on weekends and on Mondays and on Tuesday mornings, thankfully I don't teach on Tuesday mornings, really digging into materials. And that's the bulk of the time. I have been actually pleasantly surprised at the amount of citizen contact that we get. I know that many people think citizens don't care, they're not involved. But I do get quite a few emails, phone calls, even some hard copy letters that are written, not as much as email, of course.
Yeah.
So, and I like to respond to citizen calls and so on. So there's quite a bit of that. It is very time consuming. And when we're working on exciting projects, that's invigorating.
Sure.
But when we're working on things that just seem to be divisive and contentious, then it's not as much fun anymore. So overall, it's been a mixed bag.
Go ahead.
I have a comment I'd like you to respond to.
Sure.
I think you are a lightning rod on the council. I think you're articulate, knowledgeable about issues, and forceful in your speech. Do you see yourself that way?
No, I tell you, compared to what I think I'm capable of,
Okay.
I think I've been very mellow on the council. Now
Okay.
that's looking at it from my eyes. I do try and stay fact-based, do try and see all sides of arguments. But like everybody, sometimes an issue will hit me in a certain way and I'll become more passionate. But no, I thought I was more of a lightning rod when I was more of a journalist
Okay.
than on the council. But again, that's for people to judge. Obviously, you feel that way, so.
I have a second one, a little stronger. I think you're also contrarian. I think sometimes you're augmentative for augmentative's sake, and you're unwilling to compromise. I don't see you as a team player on the council. Is that fair?
I see myself as a team player. I think that on many issues, let me give you an example. The convention center,
Okay.
which we have put much money into, when that conversation first started, I thought, there's really no way I'm going to support this.
Okay.
But in listening to the argument and listening to the debate, I voted for the convention center and so on. And there are I'm sure other issues where I may think I have a position, but in listening to citizens, listening to argument and debate, I reach a conclusion.
You ran on a platform, and I remember you because you said it more than once. You said if you're going to be on the short end of a lots of 5-2 votes, you would not seek re-election.
Right.
Is that a statement you made, and are you sticking to it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And quite frankly, I've been pleased. If you look at our council, there seem to be a lot of 4-3 votes.
Okay.
Lots of 7-0 votes. I've been pleased at how often the seven of us.
Well, a few anyway.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
think more than in the past from what
I don't think there have been any
what
in the
I've
past. I don't think that's true.
Can't count the consent agenda vote.
No. Yeah.
But one good example, and this is from last year. Probably nobody remembers this.
Okay.
There's the small business called Kimsey Castle. They're a daycare provider.
Okay.
And there was a proposal to move them into the, I think, Southwest Industrial Park, or one of the industrial parks.
Okay.
And I know that when we got into the meeting that night, I strongly sense that there was opposition to doing it. Because, daycare center, industrial park, how does this work? But that night, the council had an excellent discussion of this, where it came out through questioning that this daycare center was going to create 10 new jobs, fairly well paying. And in having that good discussion, we ended up with a 7-0 vote on that. And, I thought it was an example of the way this council works. I mean, we often do get into thorough discussion of important issues. I thought that was one of them. That was an example of economic development for the city. So, anyway, I don't perceive myself as always, or even the majority of the time, on the losing end of votes. So, if I had to make the decision to run again today, and if the criteria were, am I always on the losing end of votes, I don't think that would be a good criterion, because I have not perceived myself as being on the losing end. I mean, probably the best example, it was very, very clear when I was running for office that I wanted to see some change in leadership in the city. For better or worse, we're getting change. So Do I consider that a personal victory? No. I mean, I think it's good for the city.
Plus, that was kind of in the works before the election.
Absolutely.
You know, and I think that kind of came about as the result of a lot of things.
Absolutely, but quite frankly, this council, which has many flaws, as all governmental bodies do, I think this council finally moved on it. We are moving. There had been a lot of frustration, a lot of anger, a lot of discontent, at least since the early part of this decade. And finally, a city council, I think, has moved on it.
I think you and Jess should take credit for that. I really think you're both incredibly strong members of that council. And I've found since you've been on there that you two are really more proactive than reactive. And very often the older council members have to react to your proactiveness, that you become kind of leaders on the council, whether you disagree or agree with what you're saying, but you clearly are leaders on. I think that's raised the stature of the council, and I would take that.
Well, I
that's
appreciate
a compliment.
that.
Yeah.
Although to get back to something we were talking about earlier, it is hard to be proactive in this form of government.
It is.
I mean, when you've got essentially a department staff-led agenda,
right.
Any counselor can put forward resolutions. But as a practical matter, we are constantly being reactive to staff initiatives.
That's right.
So to try to be proactive in that environment can be done, but it's difficult.
You have a very weak committee structure for the most part.
Yeah.
I mean, very often in a legislative body, committees come with thoroughly researched things, and often you get them that go around the committee. It's never been discussed by the committee, where you're kind of acting like a committee of the whole to do the research and the information and vote at the same time.
I agree.
You don't have that foundation.
I agree, and I'm very frustrated at our inability to create what I know you've supported,
Yeah.
Dan, and I think you too, Cheryl, is a budget committee.
Absolutely.
What I have in mind is a committee with citizens on it that would look at that budget year-round,
Right.
so that we don't have this contracted
Right.
process a few months before we vote on it. I got to admit, I was very discouraged when we had a discussion of this budget committee a few weeks ago.
This is at the organization meeting?
At the organization meeting. It seemed to me that only a couple of counselors were really interested in this. So at some point, I may have to just come forward with a resolution to create a budget committee just to give people the opportunity to vote up or down on it. You know, I think it would be useful to do that, and maybe if people don't like a resolution I come forward with, they can amend or whatnot. But I do think it's important that we have people looking at that budget year-round.
Oh, at least have a 6-month report into halfway through the year.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, the city and county and state governments are going to have, you're going to be reducing spending next year if the trend continues. And you should know about that before, a week before you look at the 2010 or 9 budget.
Next year is going to be very rough.
Incredibly.
And I'll tell you, one reason it's going to get even rougher right now, I'm sure you both read in the news just the other day that the city has now lost almost all of its arbitration cases.
Yes.
Okay. I, by the way, was against going to arbitration. I thought we should settle. But now, the fact that the unions that have won arbitration essentially have a better deal than the police, who settled without arbitration, means that as a matter of morale, maybe ethics, we're probably going to have to now adjust the police package.
Yep.
We don't have to do that, but I think we're probably going to be requested to do that, and I suspect we may do it. That's not even counting the money that we've spent just to go through arbitration, which is in the tens of thousands of dollars just to go through it. So all this is making the budget situation tough, and I expect that come later this year, it's going to be quite contentious.
Yeah. Tony, this budget committee, I mean, I would support something like that, depending on how it's structured. Now, you've got some very clear ideas on how this thing should be structured. It's not just going to be citizens picked randomly from the street. They're going to have budgeting and accounting backgrounds.
Hopefully, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, similarly with the redevelopment authority, apparently we look for people that have some experience with planning and development type of issues. I think with a budget committee, you'd look for people with some finance type of background. The way I have it in mind, you'd also have 2 members of the council on the committee. And my rationale for that is that it would guarantee that at least 2 members of the council are simply more knowledgeable about this budget when we get to the official voting time. But I'm open to any number of suggestions on how we do this.
And the finance director would be on there.
Right.
which is key.
Right, yes, and by the way, our new finance director, Peggy Steno, seems to be a real top quality individual. And in fact, after our semester ends in the middle of May, I'm going to have a talk with her to get her ideas on possible budget committees, and she's open to meeting to talk about that.
Okay, good. Well, that covered another of my questions,
Okay.
so I